Hello, everybody. I think we must be live. Okay, well, let's get started. We are here talking about water today. I'm Karen Elkins. I'm part of the crew for the Awaken Your Inner Genius, and the topic I wanted to explore was a bit more about water because it's so critical to everything. And it was briefly mentioned in, I think, Lesson 39, where Walter Russell said God creates but two things, water and fire. And from these two, all things are born and made manifest. So there we go. So what I'm going to be showing you here is that the images here, these two are actually real images of drops of water. And the fun part is what you can see in these water images by the grace of George Schocher from Austria is that water is always in the state of transmutation, and it takes on the environment that it has. And I think this one really clearly shows Walter Russell's two things. One, the circle, and two, the square. You can see the square is actually on fire, and it's liquid, and then it's, red on the other side. So if we go to the next slide, James. Here we can see, here's the big question. In a drop of water, where does that one piece of drop of water, where does that get ignited from? And that's a good question. Nobody knows. So where does that spark come from? And what we can see there is you can see that what looks like a wire is an oxygen band within the water. And then the top of that, you can see the bubbles. So the two smaller images that you can see are literally the oxygen that's fused to the water. It's kind of fun to kind of look at. These are images most people have never ever seen before, so it's kind of interesting to say. So when we start looking at the next image, this is the idea that Albert Schweitzer, I don't know if I'm going to say that right. I'm going to bring in other people's work here because it's going to amplify exactly what Walter Russell was talking about when he's talking about water and its importance to all living things. So water is life's matter and matrix, mother and medium. There is no life without water. So water is where we come from. Next slide. Our friend Nikola Tesla basically said to us that in this grand design, no drop is lost, for all threads in the infinite fabric of existence come. We don't come from anything but water. So I think alignment with the last, with George, is the same thing. So if we go to the next slide, what we should realize is that we are nothing but 99.9% water at a molecular level. So if you think that if we're made from water and fire, there you go, 99%. And the importance of water is amazing. We come from, next slide, James, is water is the womb of our creation. We are born within the water. We are born within the womb of the living waters, woven by the golden ratio, which guides our growth. So in every drop of water lies the memory of life's origins and its eternal blueprint that nourishes and heals and sustains life. And that is from a gentleman by the name of Rene Canton. He was somebody that during World War I, when they ran out of blood, was using certain seawater, not all seawater, certain seawater that was cultivated from a certain bloom. And he realized that it mirrored our blood almost identically, that they could use it in replacement for life, for our own blood transfusion. Next one, James. This one, I always loved this one. When I did my own original book, I love the picture of the head melting, because it's kind of like we come in crystalline form and we go back to where we came from. So as Walter Russell would say, we are all electric creatures floating in the electric sea of an electric universe, and that's from the Divine Iliad. So it just shows that we are liquid, solids, and gases, and we're all coming from and going to the next slide, James. The living universe and the electric sea is an electric sea of living light. From it, all things are born, and to it, they return. Next slide. One way for us to think about it when we think of Walter Russell's work and we think of the idea of light and life and water, they all are there. One doesn't create without the other. So as we know in the idea of cymatics, when we put sand or water on our vibrating plate, depending on the frequency, it will create different geometries. So there was a particular absorption of energy at a particular wavelength that absolutely is characteristic of structured water. So what you begin to see is there's a crystalline nature to how water sort of gathers its coherence, and it has a lot to do with light and vibration. Next. The one thing that we can look at when we look at the totality of water, and if you really look at the spelling of ether in its original form, you can see that they're kind of look pretty much the same. So God created water and fire. If you can take the color out of both images and lay them side by side as I have, you can see on one side is the outer space and the one side is our own water. And I love it when it said, God said, let there be a vault between the waters to separate the waters from the waters. And that comes from Genesis. And you can see the different thing that, Walter Russell also talks about pressure conditions. So we need pressure suits when we go down underwater. We need pressure suits when we go into space. And so it's still the whole idea of water and pressure and how life creates. On the next slide, it kind of echoes the same sort of idea here that God created water, fire is the consumer of all things. And in Job, he says, he alone stretches out the heavens and threads on the waves of the sea. So what you see here is what you see outer space without the color taken out. And then what you see at the is a dewdrop of water. And what you will see is, if you actually notice, is the dendritical structure, meaning these are these fiery threads of fire that go out. And this is the part that actually nourishes and feeds and informs nature itself. Where we're going to see that, we go to the next slide, is when we look at nature itself, we can see that from the brain, from water, from outer space, that light travels in the same sort of patterned ways. So all matter is but pressure conditions of motion in an electric sea of light. So we saw before how the pressure from outer space to inner space, and you need your container because it's not our comfort zone here where we don't need our own little suits, but you can see how it travels through the same light. Next. The next thing you can see on the next one is this is these dendritical structures that you saw in the very beginning. And you'll see it as lightning. So this an electric charge that is driven through nature, through your veins, your lifeblood, through trees, and every other thing. You can see it down below, whether it's in rivers, it's in your leaves, it's in your foot, but also in the webs of life. So we can see that it's actually informing not just us. We're not unique to a biological system. We are part of the same sort of biological system. Next, James. Another way to understand it is that it's fractal. These are fractals in nature's design as it goes through. So water is far more than a chemical compound. It is a bridge between biology and physics, a quantum coherent substance that links cellular networks into harmonious, unified systems. And that's from what Dr. Wei Min Ho, and she was from Sense Pass, but she wrote the book, The Rainbow and the Worm, The Physics of Organisms. Sorry about that. Next one. And this one is from basically the work of Walter Russell. The variance in these dimensions of substances does not change the character of its substance, but one state. So I'm going to take you to the next slide. So you can see as it's whirling through and it's creating its fiery nature, opening up and creating life itself. It goes to the idea that we live in an electric universe. Here, where James is at, water is in different states. So water is where it's more liquefied, water where it's got more plasma. You can see the dendrites flowing through the water in the second one. And then you can see the bubbles, the gases in the other. It's still one thing, but it's doing different things to the one thing. It's a recycling system. So that's where you can kind of see where that's happening. The other place that we can see it, and there was a water bridge experiment done way, 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 way back a long time ago. And when they did the beakers were always seeking balance. So you would have thought you just left two beakers there. They put a bridge between them, and the water actually oscillated, seeking its balance. But the interesting thing that it showed on the first image where the red is, you can see that it's transferring, the water is transferring light. The second image, you see the vortexes and the whirls going in between the beakers. That means it's carrying information across the bridge. And again, you can see on the bottom one, it's actually carrying charge. So water seeks balance, water circulates life, water carries light, water carries information, and water carries charge. So that's a huge function of what water is doing, but that's not all. So on the next slide, within the water contains all the elements. It has hydrogen and oxygen, which creates the 9 octaves. And then you can see this wave of periodical spinning. This is where water is not just it's the conductor in the symphony of life itself. And that's where Walter Russell is showing that how through the ether or through water, there's always these different chemistry going on. So if you go to the next slide, you will see here's a picture of water with all the colors, and it's made of hydrogen and oxygen. And so you can see that water is just not a blue drop of water. There's a lot going on in water, which is amazing. If you go to the next slide, you can see here, there's the full range of octaves, but you can actually see, like Walter Russell talked about, there's your cube and there's your sphere spreading out in waveforms, which is really cool. And on the other side of it, what I did is I showed you, there's the picture of the cauldron, and it's showing you the gaseous forming that's there. It's doing the same thing. It's showing your dendritical structures on the outside, which is where it's branching out to, and the cool center, and where it's heating up and going out to the land. So again, you still see the circles and the wave fronts, and you see how it's spreading out in its colors in its rings of light. Next one. This takes you through that you can now see the idea that creation is but a ripple in the stillness of the infinite ocean of God's light. And this just gives you an idea of how it moves through those layers that I just showed you. And in a single drop, how can be the whole universe in it. It's within that. So the cosmic blueprint, that is the cosmic blueprint of life. The universe is a symphony of waves within the cosmic mind, where light, water, and all matter dance as one infinite element, spinning through its yin and its yang. And the next slide will give you the idea that it's all happening within a wave. So whether the first one is showing you air and how air moves with the clouds, with the planet, how in the next slide where you see the current, think of the word currents, of how water is flowing, it goes in and out. So James, go back one slide. Yeah, there we go. So there's that current still moving. You can see the next picture is clouds going left, right, left, right, left, right. That's also an electric current. You can see how in a seashell, again, if you look how it oscillates from one to the next, they're not side by side. They oscillate right, left, right, left, right, left. So from air waves to water waves, there's an electric design that's a current that moves all things from water to air to, water to air, liquid solids and gases. So next, now you can go to that one. This one reminds me of when Walter Russell carries around his Universal One. The Brahman speaks, I am the creating the wave, the optical illusion vibrating the universe into existence. And then Walter Russell would say, I'm creating things are waves. All creating things are waves, vibrations that appear, disappear, and reappear. Kind of like the tide where the water's coming in and the water's coming out. Next one. Then what most people may not know is that water itself has 3 different types. So there's light water, medium water, and heavy water. So light water, when you look at the density of it, it has 1 hydrogen or one, I forget what it is, but I'll show it in the next slide. But the light water is the one that actually grows and repairs and regenerates. The medium water that we have is the one that's most common. And the third one is heavy water, which is deuterium. And the deuterium in the water is what we made the heavy bomb with. And the person who discovered the elements of these different distinctions with deuterium was Walter Russell. And that's what actually helped create the bomb, unfortunately, for the moment. But if we go to the next slide, here's the deuterium. It has an extra electron, which creates what it is. So Walter Russell was the first to observe this unique atom variation, noting that the heavy water frequency impacts cellular structure and energy cycles. So even now today, there are people who sell deuterium depleted water, and it actually, as light water, which is the first element one, and it actually does help heal. It's got lots of studies behind it. Drink Like Water is one example where you can go and do that. So if I go to the next one, when you can kind of see, again, the difference in the layers of molecules, whether it's clustered together, dancing, or completely compact, there's the builders and the destroyers. Just like water in itself, heavy water is a destroyer. It really jams up the mitochondria. It doesn't help the blood flow through your system very well. Where the light is very fluid, it's very healing, it's very nourishing. So when we go to the next slide, what we can see just by these examples is that even our own constitution is going through these same cycles. So we ourselves are made of particles, which you can see. We are crystallized into form. And when we leave our bodies, we decompose in the sense, which is right. And as Lau Russell said, you can never die. With death, you just transform or transcend. So the transmutation of the human, the body through the different states of, think about water, but think of it as life itself. And the next slide shows you the same sort of cycle. Next slide, James. Yeah. That the next slide kind of show you how this happens in nature. So what happens I took the idea of the volcano. Down below, we always have the aquifer, so there's always water. At the center core, it's actually building up the heat. It compacts to a pinch point, which is right here, where it compresses and compresses. And you'll see those charts in Walter Russell's things. And then it implodes and explodes. That's what they call a triple point. And at that point, there's a transmutation of elements. It drives itself back up. It creates water again, lightning strikes, and it comes back down. It's like a continuous cycle through life, death, and rebirth. So the next one. This takes us to what we were looking at in lesson, I think, 40, where it talked about the tetrahedron and why the tetrahedron was important with all of the mechanics of life. The tetrahedron is key to those elements that we just talked about. Here's on the right, it's molecules. They triangulate, that's how they form. Water triangulates to create its form, and light prisms are triangulated. So this whole idea is what happens on the bottom. You'll see the triangulate and how they expand. There's that rough little chart. It shows you how electricity literally elevates out. Those are the dendritical structures. So on the next slide, you wonder, well, how could those triangles make life? So if we stick here for a second, you can see how the branching happens. Think about how your lungs happen. Think about how your hands are at that same sort of expression. So this is how life from these triangular shapes begin to take form. Another way of looking at it on the next slide is if you would take that idea and make it look like it's spinning at the same time rotating, you can see how this creates what we actually see as fractals in the sense how they move and spin and how they generate life themselves. And you can see, again, there's that wave function. And what part of that wave is it carrying to? So we come from the fold and we're woven of the wave and the woven of the particles of light. So if we go to the next one, when we look to nature and how it outspins the spirals, we can see how it outspins our galaxy. It outspins a fetus, your ears, your eyes. And as Richard Merrick would say, life also grows out of spirals. We can see that the unfolding Fibonacci spiral in tree branches, spirals and clusters in the nucleus, and spirals in the human embryo. In every real and physical way, everything emerges out of the infinite as spirals, continually stabilizing into harmonic waves or spheres. So that's so you can kind of get the visual on that one. And the next picture just shows you that from Leonardo to a painting on the bottom with Jesus from the 1400s, they kind of understood that life was geometry and unfold in these wave patterns. And the fractals are actually known as the thumbprint of God. So when we go to the next slide, think of the three, the tetrahedron, as the prism of light. So each human being is a prism refracting the light of the cosmos into the unique colors of their soul. So it's a kind of a pretty way of saying, kind of putting up, trying to speak of the prism. So water is a programmable liquid crystal. That's another way of thinking of it. Crystalline nature of water in a molecular level, uncovering a dynamic and adaptive quality. So when I met Randy Haddon, he basically said to me, water molecules contain over 440,000 panels in every single one of those cubes. So imagine just in one drop of water what's actually happening. It's huge. So if we go to the next slide, the one other thing that we talk about, the two forces of creation, we talk about, in the next slide. There we go. Thanks, James. The two creative forces is fire and water again. So the fire is the father principle and the water is the mother principle. So the fire is the square and the part that spins out, that discharges, is the female. So we'll go to the next slide. And there was a reason I thought that this was partially pretty important when we were talking about the cube and the sphere, is in the cube, there's two tetrahedrons, which was mentioned in the last lesson, one male, one female. And in that center part of it is where the fusion hits. It's where the fire actually ignites and where fusion and creation actually come into that place. But in the cube also is the divider, and it also creates a boundary for the wave. So if you didn't have some boundary for the waves would be all over the place. You wouldn't have any container to harmonically adjust based on the stacking, the wave patterns that come out, that generate from condensed cool to the expanding hot, which creates different geometries that go with it. So these wave functions are really key. So when we look then again to water as part of polarity, water is got what they call a dipole nature. And a dipole nature means it's got two different poles. It's got we know what that means. So the universe is like life itself. It thrives in interplay of opposites, light and dark, creation, destruction, order, and chaos. And so when we see that, we now know that water has that dipole nature. But if we go to the next slide, you will see this is the kind of like a bio battery. It's the dipole nature of life itself. It's an electric charge seeking equilibrium, like when we looked at the water experiment. It coordinates the flow of energy and signals across paired structures. It's like the two chambers of the heart. It pumps efficiently. And that same idea works in the same way our water works and flows in the northern hemispheres. You can see it's the same current that repeats itself. So nature constantly repeats itself in these aqueous environments. And your body, think about it, it's got polarity itself. You've got the right side and the left side. You've got the right side of your chamber, the left side. You've got your two hemispheres. So water, if you go to the next slide, so water carries the charge, and it actually acts like a battery. So now when you see the dipole part of it, you can understand that water's always picking information up. It's picking up energy from the outside field. That's why when you go out to the sun, it's really nourishing for you. Or when you go walk on the beach, or you go walk on grass, you're actually picking up the charge of the earth. So the earth actually gets like 1,000 lightning bolt strikes every minute. So it's always getting charged, just like you, when you go out and you get nature, you're getting charged. So it's important. That's why I said really important that you actually drink water. So I'm going to show you the next slide just for the fun of it. It's from George. One more. That's the one that shows you that we're like a battery. Next slide. This one's just to show you that water actually acts and does work like a circuit. And then the other picture, which is kind of like the one that was scrambly with all the white around it, that's showing you the fusion that literally happens inside when you've got the circuit going, and Alicia gets to that point. It shows you the fusion that's in water, which is really cool. Okay, next slide. So here's where we see water orders energy, forms via electrical radiation from light. So again, we're talking about the sun. We're talking about infrared. So again, the circuit ordering, it's molecules, the bubbles, which we'll get to down to explain more further later. And the other showing you the fire and how the fire records. So now we're gonna go back to the idea of the box. We've always talked about, the next slide, James. We always go to the idea, the networks, and this is just for us to be reminded of all these particles and how things get arranged. So we'll go to the next slide. And this is where, again, where we're talking about the mirrors in the cube. And if you want to hit that, yeah, there you go. That's so you can see how we're either coming into the cube or coming out of the cube. We're coming into the fold or out of the fold. And how does we get spheres from cubes? If you can hit that one, the next one, James. Next slide. And then if you can, yeah, this is how you take the cube and make it into a sphere. So you can see how things unfold and then refold back. And if you look at those coordinates there, you'll see all of those are reflected points of light of where we come from. So the next slide, yeah, you got it. You can go back there. So the fourth phase of water, the next slide. The fourth phase of water, once you see those different layers, here's where Dr. Gerald Pollack comes in. And the fourth phase of water is the gateway to creation. So in these layers, imagine that they're like a film, and each one of them can actually move. And depending on the grid shape that they create different structures. So this is Dr. Pollack's groundbreaking research on the fourth phase of water, which reveals its highly organizing crystalline structure. It's also distinct from the other things that we've seen, which is familiar to the liquid solids and the vapor states. So if we go back to the next slide, forward to the next slide, sorry, James, we can then begin to see that this water creates this, what they call a hexagonal shape. And this hexagonal shape is, I'm going to say, it's your three-dimensional box. It goes back to the cube. And so in this phase, water responds to energy, particularly light, by forming structured layers of molecules. These organized states act as a framework capable of storing energy and information, making it a vital element in the assembly of life's building blocks. So it goes back, I love it how when we find these words and we go, why is, because I know when I first started looking at Walter Russell's work, was why the cube? Why the cube? And it was like, oh, and when you start seeing that it is the organizing principle of an atomic structure. So if you go to the next slide, then what you see here is the atomic resonance as a framework for life. So this is all of life on Earth is composed of mostly carbon-12 and water. This is the case because carbon-12 bonds or resonance with more simple elements than any other element in the universe. When mixed with water, carbon-12 creates endless chains of sticky amino acids capable of crystallizing life into form. And that's Richard Merrick's work. So it's actually solidifying one of Walter's elements where carbon is the middle point, where life, this is what we are, we're carbon-based beings. So this is perfect. As the cube, as the square, as the carbon, here we go. So if we go to the next slide, we can kind of see how it begins. At carbon-based, we start with the cube, and we go, when we finally comes out, it comes out as a sphere. So a crystalline lattice can be described as a three-dimensional arrangement of atoms, ions, or molecules, and a crystalline material organized in repetitive patterns. And the most beautiful thing about this one, next slide, is that that's actually the structure that you're born in. You're born in hexagonal water. So the biogeometry, the hexagonal blueprint, is that for creation. Goes back, keep thinking of the yin yang, the explosion that happens within. So water's hexagonal structure represents nature's most efficient conductive designs. In structured water in the exclusion zone, the hexagonal layer form a natural electrical current which the body separates positive and negative charge. The separation creates energy gradation that powers cells, functions akin to the way a battery stores and releases energy. So we've already seen that we know that water acts like a battery. If we look at this with Walter Russell's work, you can see hexagonal, we've got the cube. We can also see that it divides between the two, and it's organizing. It's the balance of energies. The next slide was one that was kind of fun for me when I was working on my own water book, is looking at how the web of life mirrored back onto Earth looks like. Again, we're looking at an electrical discharge pattern, which is really kind of interesting, but it also looks like the flower of life. And so electricity is the universe's heartbeat, connecting all that is seen and unseen. And so when you see the weaving pattern, so Richard Feynman, who's kind of interesting, he had a saying that there's more energy in the small of the teacup than there is in the whole universe. And that is, again, going back, when you compress energy to a finer and finer and finer point, it condenses. That's a condensing principle of Walter Russell's. You're going to get more, boom, it's going to expand. So nature uses only the longest threads to weave her patterns so that each small piece of her fabric reveals the organization of the entire tapestry. So that's the blueprint. So there you go. So how does that weave itself? So the next slide, it's coming, I think in the next lesson, Walter Russell doesn't name them as such, but they're called platonic solids. And the platonic solids are the core crystalline structures that create the universe. Was also the idea of Kepler when he had nested systems in the universe, and it works away. So what I was trying to show you here, can you repeat that one again, James, or not? When this one plays out, you'll see that for the, there's coordinates. When that moves and you see the light rotating and spinning, on the bottom, there's a coordinate number for every single turn of that web. So you can imagine that as God's weaving his web and that complexity, and there's 5 or 6 different, there's 7 actually, different geometries. I know there's 5 platonic solids, and then there's a guy named Chester who came out with 7. So with that, all those coordinates going together in a matrix, you can see how life can be woven in all these different unique patterns. So the next slide kind of gives you the idea when we see light coming down in this fabric and it looks like these carbon based, this just kind of gives you an idea of how it comes down and it shines on us. And then Walter Russell's next one, matrix, where all is crystalline, all matter is frozen light. You can see you've gone from here, we've gone from there where you can see it shining down, and then you can see it, next picture, next slide, where if you're looking at it straight on, here's this beautiful crystalline matrix, and it weaves itself through time and space and through these little particles, and as it comes closer and closer to Earth and it gets more and more dense, we start seeing life emerge itself. So if we go to the next slide, you might consider yourself points of light. There you go, made like digital art. The next image I just threw in just to show you from Mr. Shoker's point, these are images directly from water coming out of a well, and they almost look like people, and the other one looks like a horse, the horse's head. So you can see water takes on the information. If you go to the next slide, this came from the Austrian Alps, and it's like one of the old beautiful fern leaves from way back when. So you can kind of see that through water, it takes on a resonant field, it travels through points of light, and that will take me to the next slide, which takes you through these connected web of networks where all fields unite. And what is the common thread are the particles, the waves, and the points of light. And if you're okay, James, that's the cosmic, if we go then to the cosmic wisdom, makes this a light, a holographic matrix of light. And this is what the field of water, think about water as ether, water. When you go outside, you say, well, I'm not floating in water. Well, there's a lot of humidity, or there's some humidity, that's water. If we didn't, our eyes would dry up, everything would dry up. So we're still living in a big sea of water, some finer form or the other. And when you think about it, most people don't know, we get more oxygen out of our oceans than we do even from our own air. We get about 70% from the oceans. So on the next slide, so now that we kind of get the idea that water is a conductor of energy, well, the one thing I didn't put it in here, but it was one thing that Tesla thought. He knew that there was this matrix, and within this matrix, we were all able to communicate. And that goes back to all these points of light. And Tesla was somebody who definitely got what we affectionately call our downloads. And he felt that because it said thought water was a conductor of all forces. It's embodied many of Tesla's ideas, acting as a medium through which we can experience the interconnection of all life. So it's a beautiful thing. So then we're going to take a little tour. The next one is just to show you, there was some latest research in the last century where we've learned some really profound things that water does. So Dr. Luc Montagnier is the one who sort of discovered that he hypothesized that water could remember the electromagnetic signature of DNA, suggesting that water as a medium may encode and transfer information between biological systems in ways previously unrecognized, meaning my vibe, which is I'm 99.9% water, has a frequency in these molecules that are holding me together. And then I'm talking to you, which is your molecules holding you together, but they're not solid. So we're still transferring the vibe, the information, the frequency from one to the next. The next person basically was kind of taking that to the next place and saying, through his research people, that that his research brings to light water's substantial response and its power to collect, store, and transport information, connecting us to a broader vibrational world. So in other words, since water, as we know with Emoto's work, stores memory, and other people's work as well, that water is that interface that we're talking about. Next. So the next one basically says the body is a magnetic liquid crystal system. So this woman basically came up with the idea that since we are this system, we live in a magnetic field, but we made of liquid crystal water. According to her research, our bodies function like the most sophisticated computer in the world, where liquid crystal water and magnetic forces work together to create a cohesive, self-regulating biological system. So what I think is interesting, if you look at these functions, that like you look at your brain, it's actually working like a network. And it's like a storage bank. That's kind of how it works. So the next person basically was saying it's a liquid tape recorder. So he demonstrated that water acts as a liquid tape recorder. Water stores, transmits electromagnetic vibrations. That means you and I are constantly in communication. So when people are thinking of telepathy and things like that, I think if we stopped and we paid a little bit more attention to body language, the vibrations that we're feeling, we might be able to be more attuned to our environment and not just blow it off like, oh, I'm thinking that, no, that can't be true. Where maybe that person is sending signals and maybe that is true. So the next person, the next sort of research that came out, which had a lot of controversy when it came out, is the whole idea of homeopathy. So homeopathy is more than a mere dilution through penetration, where we unlock the subtle energies within, revealing nature's intimate power to heal. So he would put a diluted water, and they kept finding the more they diluted, the essence was still in the water. So that's when they started coming up with the nature of homeopathy, where you can put a drop of something in to heal something. And boy, that one had a lot of feedback and throwback. So but this takes us to the next level of this kind of concept of an idea, where water is a holographic recorder. So when we think of the Akashic records, or we think of like in the Book of the Dead, where everything is recorded, Walter Russell talks about how life is constantly recorded in this matrix of light. So nothing is unrecorded because it's God's thinking, and we're part of God's army working away. So it is a feedback loop. It has its memory. It is recorded in your container for you. So it's pretty fascinating. So we go to the next slide. Again, the body is a living hologram of light and sound. And that's why when you think of all of the different frequencies that every single drop of water holds, Gary Buchanan, he passed away a couple of years ago, if you actually look him up, there is a website for him, and you will see his color and vibrational frequencies that actually help heal. So a full spectrum water, if you're getting the full range of God's good love and light, it's actually can be very healing for the body. And add to the symphony. I remember when I was looking years ago, when the Chinese used to eat their food, they would eat something of every part of the rainbow so that they would have a balanced diet. But it's also a balanced spectrum within their cells. So the next one is the idea of Don Estes. It's what we were talking about. Water's molecule make up an entire spectrum or octave of resonance, bridging the gap between chemistry, biology, and physics, allowing it to support life on both physical and energetic levels. It's an inspiring way to think about water's place in the universe. So, and even our place in the universe, because when you think about it, we're all part of that light spectrum of light. And when we look at the different bands of colors within the human race, even in Africa, there's people who are black that have more blue, that have more red. We call the Chinese more yellow. We got the white guys who are more white, but some have more tan. So we're all got a piece of a bit of color coming from that light weave, which is beautiful. So when we think something's different or better or worse, it's crazy because we all come from God's light, God's universe. And then the next one, yeah, you can skip through that one, James. That was just kind of like how we're stepping through that color. And when we look at Walter Russell's universe, this holographic algorithm of numbers, where we talked about the algorithm, zeros and ones, where we store rings of light and information, you begin to see that this beautiful symphony of light, color, sound in an aqueous solution, the aqueous solution gives it its flexibility, it gives it its canvas for things to work on. And if we don't think another way, the next slide, James. I think when we think of how we influence the water, whether you're in a town or a Swiss Alps or whatever, you can see that there's a geometry to the local water. And you drink that information in form. So you're always drinking or eating information. Even your food is based on light. So water has memory and carries with it our thoughts and our prayers. As you see, truth is far beyond the understanding of modern science, which is kind of a shame. If we go back and look at ancient traditions, every ancient tradition from Africa, whether it was the Dogons to the Hopi to indigenous cultures, the Vedas, you name it, water was always sacred. And as you kind of look at through some of the things we've looked at, you can see why it is, because it holds, it is everything that you are. It is everything that you come in contact with. It is everything that you consume. And it is vitally important that the water you drink and share and have is critical. But just as much as that is, the next slide, because we're always speaking, next one, since we're always speaking into the ether, we are always creating a signature. So if you're wondering how it is that you make that impression on somebody, when you speak, you're speaking geometry into space-time, and it has its shape algorithm, and its corresponding numbers that go with it. So you can see here, this is a woman's, oh, I'm sorry, James, next slide. I'll go back to that one in a minute. This is the woman's voice when she's speaking. She's creating a field of information, and every single one of those things is in making an impression on you. Think about that. Impress on you. The impression is that vibration that she's speaking. This is from John Stuart Reid, who created, I skipped over the slide, sorry about that, the Simoscope. And he's been dedicated to showing people the vibration, yeah, thank you, the power of sound through his toolbox there. He often does workshops. He also has a new app, if you want to put it on your phone, that shows the sound and the frequency you're making as you're delivering it and what's coming into you. So that's kind of a fun one if you go to the Simoscope. But it begins to show you, again, if we go to the next slide, this is something that we discussed in some of the, I think, lesson 39 or whatever, what makes sound, what makes sound come to life is when the two bubbles come together, collide, and then they come and burst into open. So it is important that you understand water, molecules, and the fire are what are creating our reality. It's not so simple, but when you see it in its complexity, it's pretty cool. So how do we put that again through space? This is if you hit that button and make it move a little bit. This is Don Essie's work again, where, next slide. If we spin through space here, yeah, thank you. When you speak, imagine that you are speaking into space, and that toroidal field that you see is the golden ratio moving, and through each one of those coordinates, it travels through and hits like a screen in the back. Don's created something where you can actually see your voice moving in time and you'll see your expression going through. So that's a kind of a fun one. So when we go to the next one, it says, "Let there be light. And in the wave lies the secret of creation." So you can see that in that wave where the water's moving, you can see the light, the wave, all dancing, and it's creating. Yeah, I love that one. I found that one because you can see the ripples in the wave, you can see the light moving, and you can see that it's fluid. And the other image is it's fixed. It's the seashell, and you can see how through its creation, how the waves have made an impression on it itself. If you think how seashells in the seashore are created, it's kind of cool. But if we go back to the same idea of Walter Russell on the next slide, we can see again the idea of compression and heat. So what makes the difference between a coal and a diamond is pressure. I think there's always a fun one to do. So when I had my young son, I was doing education. It was kind of funny. I was sitting there watching this stove. It had a pot of water, and water, you just put it in. It's still, nothing happens. You turn up the heat, and what happens? The bubbles start bubbling up, and then as the water begins to fade, it begins to rise into gas, and there it is. You got your smooth water heated up, bubbles up. And when it's done, it actually even rearranges its bubbles into continents if you pay enough attention long enough, and then it rises up. So when we look at the next image, we look at what's happening with all these waves, because you can't think of water without the waves and what's happening. Sound waves, light waves, frequency waves. It's the same thing working through a less dense environment. So I just wanted to show you, there's again the three angles and Walter Russell's cube. But when it begins to spin out, you can see what happens within those. And the next slide, you can see Walter talks about the lenses. He talks about the magnetic field as the first one. The second one, you can see how the lenses move around his cube. And the third one over, the cube is 2 by 2 by 2, shows you time and its coordinates. So it's actually managing the magnetic field through light and even time. So when I found that one, I thought that was kind of fun. But the idea on the next slide, when you think of how all this dances in the matrix, you can see that this geometry is global. It's not just Walter Russell's work. It's been known through time and through various wisdom traditions. The verging of the yin and the yang, the Merkaba body, again, the cube, and even in the old mandalas. The next slide. Just to show you how the ancient wisdom to modern times kind of shows you that there's nothing new under the sun. But when we look at it too, we go to the next slide. This is all light is created by the force. And this one shows you the electricity, again, as Walter Russell in his expanding wave function with the different colors, and what this animation of orbital electricity looks like exactly what's happening. So it's not like Walter Russell was just thinking definitely went through the octaves. He definitely understood them. And we do create a gravitational field around. So all of that is very cool. So when we look at water, when we're getting to the end, the next slide kind of shows you this spin nature is the whirlpool of energy. It's the workhorse of the universe. We have made motors, engines, and all kinds of different technologies based on water between the eddies and how nature kind of works. The person who was very ahead of his time with that was Victor Schellberger, who looked at the egg shape and showed, again, you'll see the golden ratio in it and how it spun, the yin and the yang, the two halves of the sides. So as we sort of like think about life and water, we go to the next slide, and it says, they both listened silently to the water, which to them was not just water, but the voice of life, the voice of being, the voice of perpetual becoming. And I think if we look at the structure, how it actually resonates, informs, stores, transmits, is alchemical in the way that we can even work with those elements to transform our own energy. And that's part of, I think, one thing that the whole idea of why we do what we do is, okay, it's nice to know how science works, but how does it apply and how can I use that as a toolbox? And one of the toolboxes is like, how much anger, rage, or how do I run that fire through me? Is it desire? Is it a good thing? Or is it the spirit, what I speak and what I say? It's that oxygen, it's the cadence, it's the calmness, it's the sweetness, or not? Or is that water, what the memories that I'm storing, the things that is it working for me or is it working against me? So if you look at the water that you were drinking, if you come from one city or the not, you can get water filters. You can get water that actually vortexes that we saw. And the vortexing actually restructures the water, brings charge back to the water. And when you drink the water that's reorganized and structured, it actually is quite healing for you. So if we go to the next slide, it's just a reminder that water is a mirror to our human civilization. That's exactly how Schellberger thought about it. It mirrors the health of the human society. And right now, I think we've allowed certain corporations or our own ignorance to inform. And this is nothing that we cannot fix, nothing that we cannot solve. When we learn to honor water, not just within it, because it too, its healthiness in the rivers informs and helps the fish. It helps the air. The air we breathe has still got the water. So having all of it polluted will only make problems for ourselves. So I think it behooves us to really stop and think twice about, whoa, water carries information. Whoa, it's transmitting information. Whoa, I'm going to take that in and it's going to inform my body. I think it's a time to pause and think maybe we need to realign our self to the importance of it and the honoring and respecting of it. And if we realize that every single person on the planet has got the same issue in the tissues, we all need to work together to bring all of ourselves back in harmony with the respect of water. So if we go to the last slide, I think it's kind of sums it up too. Water is the carrier of life, the pulse of the planet. It purifies, nourishes, and sustains the sacred balance that supports all existence. Comprehend and copy nature. This is where our salvation lies. And so if we use the way water works, we can have free energy over unity and all kinds of good things. So with that, I hope I wasn't too choppy with that. It's a lot of information, but we got you there in about an hour. So thank you. This is Karen. And thank you for listening. And I hope that was informative enough for you. I think water is an least understood thing that we have. And I hope that helps you bring a little bit more respect for yourself, for your friends, for your water, and how we speak and what we do.
Well, that was really good, Karen. Thank you. If you're just now tuning in, I would recommend going back and rewatching. If you have just watched the entire presentation, you might also want to do the same thing. Karen, while we see if we have any questions, yes, we'll do see if we have any questions come in. I wanted to ask you, what inspired you to do this work? I know people who are watching, they've seen your visual journeys that you've done, and I'm always impressed at how great you are at not only creating these images, but finding images and videos that support what you're talking about. If you've ever done any kind of work like this, you know how difficult that is. What inspired you to do this? Because I would imagine it takes almost an obsessive level of dedication to do what you've done for, how long have you been doing Science to Sage?
I've been doing the magazine for about 15 years.
Yeah. So for 15 years, and each individual visual journey you do is so detailed. What inspired you to do this work?
You know, I think each one of us has a calling or has a quest. And my quest was to know how God created. And that just has driven me for all these years. And the magazine has allowed me to meet some of the best in the world. Mm-hmm. When I started, it was kind of serendipitous how it began. And it was because I used to start putting on events. And when I started putting on events, I started working with best-selling authors. And when I started doing that, I instantly had access to some of the best. And I'd never done a magazine. I just picked up my Mac and started doing it because I wanted to. And then I looked at magazine layout. So, I mean, it was just like, okay, I could do that. I can do that.
Following your desire, passion.
It was. And, you know, the little breadcrumbs just kept showing up. So, yeah.
And so what ultimately led you to the work of Walter Russell? Because did you start with that, or did you begin on this path with something else?
I think I always went to church. And then one day I lived in Vancouver, BC, and my Muslim girlfriend said, let's go enjoy this guy. He's a Vedic guy, and let's learn some of this Eastern tradition stuff. And that was the beginning for me of understanding that God was a scientist. So even Walter Russell had his Bhagavad Gita. So in the Eastern traditions, in the Vedas, is a ton of science.
Yeah.
Even Tesla had his guru. And so that was like the aha moments. And then my son was struggling in school, and I created a school, and I was putting curriculum together. And it taught me that the things that we thought were so separate were not. And I started seeing that so many cultures had so much in common. And it drove me even more. And then every time I thought I was done, something else would show up that was even more riveting, that went with that thing, that went to that. I feel like I'm looking at the elephant. And because of all these people, I can see all these different angles.
All the different parts.
Yeah. And I think that has been my passion and my love of learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I've got another question that's actually related to that. And we have an audience question from Karen Mahan. Just one moment. Let me ask this question, then we'll get to audience questions. So you mentioned Nikola Tesla, and I want to say it as it was on the slide. You said that Nikola Tesla saw water as a conductor of energy, and it embodies many of his ideas about water acting as a medium through which we can experience the interconnectedness of life. How do you feel if society accepted that as truth, or as some kind of guiding principle? How do you feel like it could change our individual lives and society as a whole?
I think it actually it mirrors Walter Russell's work. And because it says tap into the field, tap into me, the one. I have all the knowledge. So that is exactly the same. I think it invites you to go back to the Walter Russell work. And what got me to, I didn't answer your other question before. I had a friend when I first started this as well, who said, if you read one book, read the universal one. So that was always sort of kind of kept going back as a reference point. And every time I'd go some over here, I'd find Walter Russell over there. So Walter Russell's been in many, many, many magazines.
Just keeps bouncing off of different.
It just kept showing up.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the idea of the medium or the matrix, as you think about it, is that holographic universe where you're tapping into, I want that one. And then you get that aha moment, or you open up your computer and the next thing is there for you. The universe is beautiful that way. So for me, that's where that web sort of mixes all in.
Yeah. Well, great. So let's go ahead and go to Karen Mahan's question. You can see it on the screen here. She says, can you clarify how elements are not things but conditions?
They are conditions because they are, as Walter Russell says, they are that pressure condition. So if you look at the periodic table, when it goes from little to big, and as the elements build up, so there's a really good example that's more visual in some ways in Walter Russell's, which is Ito Cow's called the SAM structure of the atom. And you can see how from the platonic solids they build, and they build. You can see the molecules build, but they basically clump onto a certain point where they get to carbon, and then the clusters just cluster bigger. So they are conditions. They are conditions. That's what they are. They are.
Well, the question is, how are elements conditions but not things, or not things but conditions?
They're part of how matter expresses itself. I'm going to put it this way: they're informed to inform. So they're structures of information. Does that make sense? So they are a condition of information transferring itself. It's just like if there's a James and a Karen, his nose is different than my nose and my eyes. There are people that can even read your body and your body shape as a representation of your condition. Mm-hmm. Right? Just like when John talked about bananas and bananas were turning brown, and I said, so is mine. Sorry.
Well, hopefully that answered your question, Karen. If anyone else has any further questions, please put them in the comments section. Karen, are there any other resources? You gave plenty in the presentation, so if people do need resources, they can go back. We'll probably end up posting this similar to as we do with the visual journey, correct?
If you want to go to Science to Sage magazine and go to free issues, okay. There's a really good issue on the free one on water, one of my first ones, but I have a ton in there. It's got tons of scientists in it, really beautiful imaging in it. It's that is a really good one. So if they go to Science to Sage, forget signing up or whatever, you can sign up for the newsletter part. It's free. You get everything anyway.
Okay,
and
great.
Yeah.
And you can see that in the description of this video. And Karen says, yes, I get it. I'm so grateful for you, Karen, for following your bliss. So, all right. So are there any other resources for the specific topic that you would recommend?
Yeah, there are. You know what it is? I'm having a problem getting the book out. So I just finished a book called Echoes of Water. The site's up. The book's not up because I'm having a hard time getting it through Ingram Press at the moment. It keeps giving me an error. But on that site right now, there are the list of all of these people. It has their websites. It takes you to where you can get their books. So echoofwater.com.
Okay. Echoes of Water, we'll put that in the description as well.
Yeah, but it will get you to all of these different people that you've seen through it. It will take you to their website. It will take you to their books. And yeah.
Great. Okay, so if you are watching this as a replay and you have questions, feel free to put them in the comments. We will try to answer them maybe on our Sunday night broadcast or within the comments themselves. Karen, is there anything else you want to leave the audience with, or is there anything you can take this topic that at times may seem very complex and distill it down to one thing that you would like to leave the audience with?
It's so simple. Once you finally get it, it's liquid, solids, and gases. It's nothing but particles, light, what is it? Water, particles, and light. And all it is rearranging and unarranging and rearranging and creating life and all of its beauty through its crystalline matrix. And this is where and I think there was one thing I didn't quite get the point across while I was thinking about it. In the square where we keep talking about the mirrored universe, where we're sitting in that mirrors, again, water is a mirrored reflection of our own life that we spin out. And it's so important, which, I think we always need to be reminded that it is a mirrored universe.
Mm-hmm.
And we can always restructure within this lifetime or another lifetime, who knows, right? But it is a really interesting part. And it's not just us, but it's also the collective at any given moment. And may we learn to live in peace, for God's sakes. May we live that vision that Walter Russell has, where there's so many people trying to create this disharmonious thing. And then you can actually see what they're trying to do to the vibe out there, to that show that they're trying to project. It's all created. Let's uncreate that and just do Walter Russell's and Lau Russell's good work.
Amen to that. All right. Well, we will see everyone Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you, Karen. And if you would like to learn more, you can visit sciencetosage.com. We'll see you Sunday night.